Hey guys, before this episode begins, I just wanted to let you know that it has some interesting audio. So we recorded this episode live with a good friend of ours, and he had some really good, strong audio coming through, but I forgot to check our mics, and I actually set them too low, so it's really quiet. However, I've edited them so you can hear us pretty well, but the editing was a little complicated, and it ended up being that when all of us, or even sometimes two of us, spoke at once, that it was hard to hear. So there'll be a couple parts where the audio isn't the best, but overall, I think you'll find it a relatively normal listening experience. I just apologize for that, and in the future, we will make sure that that does not happen. All right, on to the episode. Welcome, guys, to the long-awaited episode on this. We have today with us our very special guest, Josiah DeGraaf, our long-term friend. Yeah, I guess we're going to keep you. You're long-term.
You're not getting rid of me, Daeus.
He's been here. He's been a friend for a while. We've known each other in just Christian writing community circles, done a lot of projects together. He's come out here for a little retreat with us this weekend. So perfect opportunity to do this in person, which is much better than over computers, which didn't work when we tried it last time.
No, it didn't.
This is our second take. I should probably tell people a little bit about who you are, so you're not just
It's optional.
person. So Josiah, he has helped us run in the past when we ran Story Embers together, website for Christian writers. You also work at The Young Writer, which trains young writers in how to succeed at writing, both in the craft and then the business side of that. And you've been a high school literature or English teacher?
English teacher, technically, yeah.
Yeah. So very qualified to talk about this. We brought him on because Kate knows a lot about myths. I know a little bit about myths. I'm like, that's not the greatest dynamic. Let's be a third guy. It'll make it much more interesting. I just really like this dynamic. This is a lot better in person.
I agree.
Yeah. So we're getting a really authentic experience. We're always on the floor. And so like, let's just be honest. This is who we are. We're doing this really.
Do you like sit on the floor?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the subject.
Yes. So the subject is myths. And we all three of us are very geeks extraordinaire. We realize this may not be the case for you. So just to kind of put it all in context, this is for the parent who is wondering, do I let my kids read Rick Riordan? How do I approach some of Marvel's stuff? It has to do with gods. It has to do with mythology. Is it pagan? Does it matter? How do I have this conversation with my kids? Do I even have this conversation with my kids?
Yeah. The reason
We're just going to talk about mythology.
Yeah.
And with that in context, hopefully you glean something.
Sure. And even if you're reading myths proper, like Beowulf or the Iliad or whatever, yeah, that's some good stuff.
Those weird homeschool kids. Starts out their mythological education with Beowulf.
Which is how you should do it, right?
I feel like that is the ideal way to start your homeschool education.
Beowulf. Yep, it's good stuff.
I was obsessed with Beowulf for a good solid 3 years of my young adult life. So.
Yeah, cool person.
Mm-hmm.
I approve. You want to hold your mic a little bit closer?
Oh, yes.
Better audio probably for people. All right. Maybe we should start off with the thesis that we're going to do.
What?
With the thesis, the starting point we're going to be operating
that?
from is that myths are not just fairy tales. Even fairy tales are not just fairy tales. That they not only say something true about the world, but they have a degree of grounding in reality.
In reality, yes.
And so,
yes.
well, maybe you're a little bit confused. Maybe you're really skeptical. We're going to get into that. And maybe you're unsure how that applies. Hopefully that'll be clear as we go on. But when we get further into the episode, we're going to move from talking about mythology and our beliefs about it to a little bit more of the application in case that's not clear.
So if you're asking, guys, are you saying that Zeus and Loki and all his ilk were actually real? Yes.
Yeah. Cancel us now.
And with that out of the way.
Okay. Yeah. So let's explain why we believe that.
Yeah, so Yeah, there's a couple of places that I come from personally here. And one of the first places I come from is just looking at what the Bible says. I think it's either in First or Second Corinthians when Paul is talking to the Corinthians, and he's talking about the dangers of idols. And what he doesn't say is don't sacrifice to idols because they're just figments of our imagination. They're not real. We're just making them up. No, he says don't offer offerings to idols because you're offering them to demons when you're doing so. And he seems to have an understanding that these gods are not, from a biblical sense, we wouldn't say they're not God, they're not to be worshipped, but there are real spiritual entities that the Greeks at least were worshiping. And the implication seems to be that may have been the case for a lot of the pagan mythologies and the pantheons that were worshipped, that there are some very real spiritual forces at work in the ancient world.
Yeah, so maybe to clarify, if we're talking about gods with a lowercase g, the etymology of the word God or some of the words for that in other languages doesn't necessarily mean an uncreated, omnipotent being alone in the universe.
Certainly not talking about a trinity.
Yeah.
No.
Let's set the Christian God aside.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the Christian God is the Trinity, uncreated, omnipotent, has attributes that no other beings have.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a distinction, but the idea is that the word God itself does not convey that doctrine.
yes.
That it refers to a being operating in the spiritual world with authority and power and rule of some sort.
To a degree.
To a degree. Not all rule, not all authority, but so when Paul talks about wrestling with principalities and powers in the heavenly places, rulers, authorities, those are some of the words that relate to kind of an ancient concept of what a god is. So that's what we talk about that. And we're not necessarily endorsing everything ancient poets wrote about.
So why we're having this conversation?
Yeah. So yeah, as you're reading, man, give me some names of
The Iliad, Metamorphoses, Beowulf.
Yeah.
Although Beowulf's a bit interesting because it's a bit of a Christianized mythology where you can still see some of the influences, but Beowulf is a Christian warrior and is trying to redeem some of the older influences for that work.
He might deserve his own podcast episode.
He probably does deserve one.
What? I need to do that? That he does deserve it. Yeah.
Yeah, but all cultures have their own mythology. If you're into Egyptian mythology or Greek mythology or Norse mythology or Celtic mythology, if it was a culture at one point, it has its own mythology. Yeah. And there's a lot of overlap, I feel like, between some of them. Mm-hmm. Celtic and Norse, at least you, Daeus, get that confused all the time. So, well.
On the subject of all these cultures and these mythologies, Kate, you were saying something really relevant earlier about some of the prejudice that sometimes we view ancient peoples with. And I was wondering if you wanted to share a little bit about that, because I thought you had some really illuminating points in that regard.
Yes. So I feel like for us Americans, a lot of the assumption that gods are fake comes, well, at least is contributed to by this Darwinistic mindset that we have, that the farther back you go in history, the dumber men get. And so, of course, they didn't know science. They had to imagine gods for themselves because they were just so stupid. And I think that's pretty stupid.
Yeah.
Was that my original point?
I think it's a real chicken and egg problem, because to us, this seems somewhat sensible. Like, I think an explanation I've heard for gods like Thor or whatever is primitive persons hearing thunder. They don't understand it. They don't understand this lightning. What is this? They don't know about atmosphere pressures and electrons. I don't either. But I plead the fifth. So they have this ignorance, and so they the modern explanation is this anthropomorphic worldview of how the concept of deities developed. Like, well, big version of me in the sky
makes fire.
And that makes sense to us because we already have the concept of a god to work with. We already are familiar with that idea. But to have no concept of a god, that anthropomorphic jump is a lot bigger than I think we initially realized.
Especially if you're assuming that they were stupid.
Right.
Which is a B's assumption.
Right. So let's say they are stupid. You have to invent a version of yourself that's kind of human, but also very different. You can't see them. That's strange.
You can see the lightning. You can see the sun.
Yeah, but and if you
which is actually huge because some of the art across cultures of these various deities is very consistent.
Right.
It's like, that's recognizable. I know that is.
And not just the depictions of them, but even like the constellations and how you connect the stars. I read a book once that was talking about the fact that multiple cultures that had no contact with each other are seeing the same constellations, images in the stars. And if you've looked at constellations in the actual stars, you'll know it is not obvious that this is supposed to be a swan or a scorpion or something else. And so when you have multiple cultures seeing the same thing, kind of makes you wonder.
Right. So, yeah, it's almost like they did have some interaction with them. And even
some like sight of them, even if we're just talking about priests.
Yeah, priests, some sort of,
priest.
trance or something that they were in.
Yeah,
who knows? We don't know everything, but basically the belief that these are real deities makes a lot more sense than that a primitive person came up with a very sophisticated idea.
Yes,
that also doesn't
about communication across cultures.
Yes, and that doesn't really make sense from just an anthropomorphic view. Like if I have a hammer and I bang it, it doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like. So there's just a lot of ways that breaks down, and it becomes it's a really creative idea and kind of sophisticated.
I think it's the best,
and doesn't even make sense.
Yeah,
even if you have a lot of creativity, it doesn't make much sense.
And just from a standpoint of considering human nature, like we deify ourselves.
Yeah, given
the option, we are our own gods, and there's nobody else. I mean, that's. Science these days is almost a religion because of that. We're like, no, this is all just science. None of it is God. We can be God because we know all the science. First of all. But just like consistently throughout human history, given the option to deny the existence of a God, yes, that we have done that over and over and over again. And I feel like a much better assumption about how things went down in those ancient days is the concept of gods or a god was inescapable, and the only choice you had in the matter was which one followed. And I think that's where you get people going aside after pagan deities because they promise something. It's that age-old lie from the garden, be like God, knowing good and evil, with all the benefits of being in relation with a god without submission, without repentance. You get stuff. Sacrifice your firstborn son to me in the fire, and you get to win this battle.
Right. And which actually, talking about these deities being real actually happened in the Bible. You have the king of Moab is being defeated by Israel pretty badly, and he's so desperate he sacrifices his firstborn son, and then it says in the text that wrath is poured out on Israel. After he did that, there's a relationship between it, and obviously God is not going.
Wasn't it
God is in Yahweh.
Yes.
Is not going to be like, well, you just broke my law.
Send Molochs. Yeah, let me
attack my people.
Yes.
And
was it like weather phenomena too?
It may have been.
Wasn't it like fire?
Oh yeah, yes, weather phenomenon. We have in Job, Satan, he sends fire down from heaven to consume livestock or something like that.
Yep. I think his house as well, if I'm remembering correctly.
I thought that was wind. It like came from the fires.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. Anyways, but that just makes it a lot more interesting when you have, I think, Elijah confronting the priests of Baal when they had this competition. Whose God's going to send fire down from heaven to consume the sacrifice? And we already know that at least some of these deities can do that from the book of Job. So it's not as if it's like which
God is capable. But it's like,
I
Baal wouldn't even show up to the fight. He was too scared. It's wedding pants.
I feel like the way that I understood that story growing up, when people around me, the way they taught it to me, there was like, Baal is fake.
No.
That's why he didn't do it. He does not actually there. All these priests are crazy. They've never gotten an answer. They have no reason to expect an answer. They're just out here gashing themselves because they're crazy people. Which does not make sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, even just looking at, what we hear about today, one of my colleagues at Lorehaven, Marion Jacobs, recently wrote a book about fictional magic and fantasy. And, one of the interesting things she did in the book in dealing with some of the objections people sometimes have to fictional magic is she listened to, I want to say, about 100 or so interviews with, people who were into actual witchcraft today and the occult and all of that. And, one of the reasons that she was listening to them is to see how many of them got into this because of fantasy novels. Spoiler alert, the majority of them, that was not the reason they got into it. But one of the really interesting points she made is like, why is it that people get into this? Well, it's because they start doing the witchcraft stuff and it actually works for a time. Right? It's kind of scary, when you realize that, like, it's not just that people in the ancient world said this, like, there are people today who have similar experiences. Now, what many of these people who have got to now the modern witchcraft say is that it works for a time, and then there's a higher and a higher cost, and eventually it stops working, right? These aren't the real God. These are not deities that should be worshipped. They can't deliver on their promises in the long term. But in the short term, they can actually do things. And I think when we look at, well, why would ancient people worship deities? Well, they probably did get stuff.
Yeah. I think so.
The testimony that I've also looked into this a little bit. The testimony of people who were saved out of witchcraft is that for the first 10 years or so, everything's great. You get the beauty, you get you get the money, you get the power, you feel amazing. But at a certain point, the demons come to collect. They're like, you stuff. Now you give us everything. And they're not loving and they're not just, and they are just there to torment you. So.
Yeah. So cycling then kind of back to mythology and kind of how this, might inform our views of myth. One of the things that comes to my mind when I'm reading these myths is that, I'm not going to say that all of these myths are necessarily true.
Yeah.
But when you look at these through the eyes of, well, there were actual demons that these people worshipped, and you look like, say, all the rape narratives in Greek mythology, you look at them like, this is how a demon would act. If these are demons up there, this is how they would act. This seems to also be what's being described in Genesis 6 when the Nephilim come down. That raises a huge can of worms. I'm not going to pay further than that. Just going to leave it as a reference. And I also find interesting how sometimes in myths you see the authors actually grappling with the reality of this. One of the most fascinating myths in this regard to me is there's a play that was written called Oedipus at Colonus. It's a sequel to the much more famous Oedipus Rex, about the man who is cursed to kill his dad and marry his mom. Most of us have probably heard of that story if we know much of mythology. Most of us probably haven't heard of Oedipus and Colonus, and there are some relevant reasons why it's not quite as vivid, shall we say, as Oedipus at Rex.
Lurid, perhaps.
Not as lurid either. But one of the reasons I really like Oedipus at Colonus as a Christian is because it's all Oedipus at the end of his life grappling with what is the meaning of morality and how do I come to terms with the fact that I worship these gods and yet they decreed such a horrible thing for me. And you just get the angst and the unsurety and the wrestling of what good is this, these gods I worship, this moral system? How do I be a pious man while also believing the fates did all of this? Yeah. And at least to me, I read that and I say, this sounds like someone who actually went through something like that, who's dealing with very real questions. Because again, if you think about what would demons be trying to do, well, trying to create something like what happened to Oedipus sounds like what a demon would do. And this sounds like how a real human being would wrestle with the fact that these gods aren't really worthy of worship. And that's one of the values I always come away from myths with is, while you sometimes have to read between the lines, I often read these stories and come back and like, I am just so thankful that we don't worship these gods, because it makes me appreciate the real God so much more when I see the alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah, amen. And also, I like your point about these ancient cultures. They're not just propaganda for these gods. It's just,
Mhm.
like, it's people who are living in this world, but it's like a genre, and different people write different aspects of the genre and have different perspectives in it. And so, not all mythology has the same message or has the same worldview or perspective
Yeah.
or spirits.
Yeah, the Norse, for instance, aspired to be like their gods,
Mhm.
whereas the Greeks were more like, man, our gods are obsessed with us.
Yeah.
They all have a different relationship to these entities, to the religions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe now would be a good time to just briefly talk about mythology and what that actually means. Because,
I have a point I want to make.
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So, for you people who are not geeks and you're like, this is too much and I don't really want to finish listening to this episode, go ahead, you're fine. My final point for you parents who you just had enough and you're like, I just want to know what I can do about Marvel and Rick Riordan and all of that. I think where we get into trouble with mythology is by assuming that there's nothing behind it, by assuming that it's fake. And so we're like, our head, we can discount this. There's nothing in this. It's just fake. It's just lies. It's just maybe a cool story. But if you look at these myths, these gods, I'm thinking specifically of Marvel, specifically of Loki, because that's one of the most common and beloved, I could say, modern takes on mythology. Once you assume that there's no truth to that intellectually with your head, then we almost feel this freedom to just follow our heart with it. And Loki is played very human. He's played very the Loki in mythology, the actual Loki, nasty dude, weird dude. Nobody in their right mind looks at that and says, "Oh, what a teddy bear." But this Loki is very different.
Yeah.
So if we're operating with the assumption that
Mute my computer real quick.
yes, that original Loki is just fake, like there's nothing actually there, then our heart is kind of free to like love this character.
Which, because it's not, this is just inspired by mythology. It's not meant to accurately depict this spiritual being. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just dangerous.
Yes.
Because he is just a created character, and in the way in which he reflects human nature, there can be stuff to love and appreciate and learn from that.
Yes. I feel like at least for girls, you guys can correct me on this, a lot of the temptation is to love the aesthetic.
Yeah.
To love the vibe, to be like, yes, cool underdog hero who wears black and green and has fabulous hair. Yes.
Talking about Loki.
Talking about Loki's stuff.
Yeah.
I thought just talking about you, Daeus.
Thank you.
His hair is moving on.
Wow.
All right.
I like to cut. Anyway, and I feel like for the small minority of people who have gotten into witchcraft for Harry Potter, say this is the same thing. They're like, witchcraft is fake. There's nothing in it. But I really love the idea of like the houses and the aesthetic of decorating with a little witchy broom in the corner or some candles that are like cauldrons or that are labeled as spells. And it's really cute. Like it's a vibe, especially around Halloween. And we can just get into these things assuming that there's nothing there, assuming that there's nothing that is willing and wanting to take advantage of our guard being down in this regard. And I'm by no means advocating fear. Like, if you want to decorate your house for Halloween with a cauldron, sure.
And you can read Harry Potter.
You can read Harry Potter. This revolutionary take from 3 homeschooleds. But I think we need to be engaging with these stories with the understanding that there is something true here. And to be able to hold intention. Like, my heart really loves this. And is it because of the story, or is it because it's really attracted to something darker?
Yeah.
Attracted to control or
attracted to the idea of my cat being a familiar who could talk to me about this or that, or I love my cat. My cat's my friend. Why wouldn't I imagine that it is my familiar spirit, or joke about it, or just to be aware, to be able to hold both those things in tension. Like, especially when I'm talking about stories, there's real lessons to be gained about human nature, about the nature of reality, about consequences of actions, etc., if it's a good story, that can be learned from the story, whether we're talking about somebody who's arguably a deity or somebody who's just a human. But when we are dealing with deities and witchcraft and all of this, I think it pays to be a little bit extra aware intellectually that you're not just dealing with something that's
Yeah.
that
Right.
real.
No, yeah, I agree, because often our head follows our heart. The heart goes somewhere first, and the head intellectualizes it. I think really this happens far more than we realize, because we like to excuse our decisions with rationalizations, but often the rationalization is not what came first. I'd say probably 99% of the time is the affections that change, and then and that's not to say that your reasons are wrong. This even happened with good decisions.
Yeah.
That's just the way humans are generally designed.
Jesus, the Holy Spirit works in you to love Jesus before your head understands and understands.
Right.
Yeah.
It's how we're made.
Yeah.
Well, then I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
We just need to be aware of that.
Right.
I think that's another thing that we have modernism to thank for, that we're rational beings. Not rational beings. That's another spiel. We don't have time to go there, but...
Well, the other thing that just comes to my mind as I'm listening to both of you talk is how much a lot of this also just comes down to what we're finding our identity in. Stories are great tools. They're great, works of art and all of those different things. But they become really dangerous when we decide I'm going to make my primary identity in my Harry Potter house, or in the Marvel fandom, or, really in anything else. If our identity is being found in a certain aesthetic that we're in, not only does that pale in comparison to the richness of Christianity, but it's just going to lead us down into bad places.
Yep. You said what I said, but in like 1/4.
Both are good. Yeah.
Anyway, you had something you wanted to say about
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just be real brief with it, so it don't take too long. It's just that we're talking about mythology a lot, and you can see that we believe that there's some truth to it, and that might be a little strange, because often we think of mythology as, by definition, a made-up story. And I think last time we were talking about this, you said that the more accurate definition of mythology is like a story about the supernatural world, or that explains like a whole worldview, contextualizes where things came from. Forth.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that a myth is something that's inherently false, I want to say I looked up the etymology of that, and that meaning only really comes to be taken as the meaning of the word in the mid-1800s or so.
Oh, wow.
The word's been around for a couple thousand years when you go back to the original Latin and Greek, but the original idea of a myth is it's a story that's explaining our worldview and the gods and all of that. And it wasn't until after the Enlightenment that we began to think, whoa, if a story is dealing with the supernatural, it must be a lie, or surely, yeah.
So we can even think of the Bible as being a myth.
Absolutely.
And this is a conversation Lewis and Tolkien had, where Lewis said myths are lies.
As if breathed through silver.
Yeah, so beautiful but false.
Yeah.
His heart was really attracted to myths, but his head couldn't go there yet. But then, with just a few words from Tolkien after the conversation, his head was
poem.
his head was able to follow his heart. And basically, Tolkien was arguing that you can't have a true myth.
Yes.
And the Bible is the true myth. There's some truth to some of the old myths, but they're not
fully true and they're not ultimate truth, whereas the Bible is fully true and ultimate truth. And it's a myth, which is good, because if it wasn't a myth, our minds could go there, but our hearts couldn't.
Yeah.
Well, we can be full beings. We can be more us than we ever could be before. But we can be who God made us to be, because the Bible's a myth.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is one of the reasons I have more sympathy with some pagans than some Christians.
Right.
Because
Oh, this is a good point. Go.
because
This is good.
they are sold out
Yeah.
for their God. They are like mind, body, heart, and soul, like dancing in the woods under a full moon type, like crazy. Who cares? They don't care. They are sold out. I'm not advocating going dancing in the woods under the full moon necessarily, but just this total abandon of their heart to what they worship. And I feel like for more sensitive and artistic and emotional Christian individuals such as myself, that is really attractive to me about paganism, but only if I do not understand that level of worship is also called for and possible and celebrated in Christ. Christianity, that level of sold out, like my heart is all the way his. I will happily, like David, just dance through the streets of Jerusalem, not caring, because my heart is full of worship. And I feel like a lot of the reason that so many people are initially drawn to paganism is because they know and understand that they were created to worship, and they don't see that in Christianity. For so many reasons. But largely because I think we're afraid as humans, as Christians, of what are people going to think if we are fully sold out for Christ, especially in today's day and age where cancel culture is such a thing, and like your online reputation is your whole reputation, and all these different reasons. But I just want to like pause and note that everything that pagans have at their religion, they have in shadow, they have in counterfeit. Christ is the real thing. So everything that's good in pagan myths is good in shadow, is good in counterfeit, and is put in context, in its proper context, in light of the myth that is the Bible.
Can I give an illustration that illustrates exactly what you said? So one of my favorite myths is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah. And, if you're not as familiar and you're listening with this myth, the basic gist of the myth is that, Orpheus's wife Eurydice dies. Orpheus goes down to Hades in order to try and get his wife back. Hades says, if you go all the way back up and don't look behind you, I'll let Eurydice fall after you. They go all the way up to the top. Orpheus, can't quite get there. He looks back and he loses his wife forever. Very famous story. Probably you've heard of it in some regard. And one of the things I find fascinating about the story is that it's told by a bunch of different poets, and each of them give a different reason for why Orpheus looks back. Some people talk about the fact that he fails because he just didn't trust Hades, that Eurydice was actually behind her.
Not a horrible decision, honestly.
Yeah, Hades is not someone to be trusted for real, right? Or some people say, well, he just loved her so much he couldn't bear not looking at her, and they point to that. There are even modern versions of the story as well in the Broadway musical Hades Town, where a large part of it has to they argue points to the fact that as human beings, we just aren't good enough to be able to have the kind of romantic relationships that we long for because of our inherent failings. And aspects of that message, I'm like, I think that's more pessimistic than is due, but there's real truth to the fact that we mess up things all the time as humans. But my favorite version of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is the one that Plato tells. And when Plato is asked, why is it that Orpheus isn't able to get Eurydice back? Plato says, well, he wasn't able to get Eurydice back because he wasn't willing to die for her. Because when you go down to Hades and you go down to death, what Orpheus should have done is to go down and tell Hades, I will take Eurydice's place. I will die for her so she can go back up. Plato says it has nothing to do with the fact they look back. It's that he wanted to keep his own life while restoring his wife's life, and you couldn't do both at the same time. And whenever I talk this, I get chills going down my spine, because this, to me, just makes it so clear that as Christians, this is a failed Christ, is ultimately what this myth is about. And even the pagans realized that if you're going to save someone from death, you can't do it without taking a cost on yourself. And it was, I feel like the closest we get in the myth to the real Christ, pointing to the fact that as human beings, we aren't willing ultimately to go to that level for our beloved. By ourselves, we are not able to save others. And so it must have taken the Son of God himself to become down and willing to die for us. And I love just how we see in the shadows of Orpheus and Eurydice both our own failings and the greatness of Christ, who is able to do that which no one in myth was able to do.
Louder for the people in the back. There are actually no people in the back. Promise.
We could pretend that we're speaking to an audience of thousands out there.
Yes. But it's some fake applause.
Every time Kate says something, flashback. Yeah, that's great. I love that. Honestly, I just loved Orpheus and Eurydice because I have a soft spot for the stupid heroes, but that's a better read.
Yeah.
And this is why Josiah's on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad.
I did have the advantage of teaching myths for 4 years in the public schools. So when it's your job to study and talk about myths, it was a pretty great job, not going to lie.
Nice. I don't know about you two. I feel like we've kind of covered the broad strokes of what we want to say. It might be time to kind of go in and fill in between those lines a little bit with some detail.
What detail are you thinking?
I'm just thinking, like, maybe bring up other stories that interact with myths, or whether they're writing their own myths, like Tolkien did, drawing from other myths, or whether they're explicitly bringing characters from myth, like Marvel or some of those other books and movies. We could talk about that. Maybe last thoughts about mythology and characters and deities and that. Do you feel like we covered kind of the main points, or?
I feel like we did.
Okay.
I'm like casting around in my brain. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
But that was a good chunk of the heart of it, I feel like.
I'm thinking just kind of like popcorn style. Each of us gets a couple last points.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah.
So what do you think, Daeus, about Tolkien as a mythologist? I know you have some thoughts about this.
Set me up for perfect. Yes. So all of Middle-earth is mythology. Arguably, you could say that Tolkien was kind of more interested in building the mythology than necessarily being a successful writer, getting a lot of books out there, whatever. He was doing it for himself largely, I think. And probably the greatest modern writer of such mythology that exists.
I don't know if I call it modern.
Okay. Post-Enlightenment. Yeah. And so Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, that have that mythological bent to them. Where it really comes out is in the Silmarillion, which is like the history of Middle-earth, and Arnor, which is like the whole planet of Middle-earth. And you get to see
Spoiler alert, it's not really a planet, but keep going.
Okay, well, what is this?
It's flat.
Is it flat?
Pretty sure.
Or I am pretty sure it's supposed to be like a really old version of Britain.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
I don't know.
with water pouring endlessly into every direction.
Okay.
Elsewhere.
All right. Well, it's got some cool geography.
Sorry, we like nitpicking too much, Daeus.
Yeah, I thought
We're detracting from your main point.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't lose all my credibility. Anyways, so when you get to the Silmarillion, you get real deep mythology. Like I read that shortly after reading a lot of Greek mythology, which is where I have most of my in-depth reading on mythology. And I was just like, oh, I see so many parallels between this and Greek mythology. Like you even have sort of a pantheon. They're not treated in the same way that the Greek gods are in his world, but there's some overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be some strengths, weaknesses to that, and you may not agree with his decision to do that, but it does open up some fun opportunities in his world.
Yeah.
So it's cool, and I really appreciate it, and I thought it was so much more interesting to read than the Greek mythology, even though it's similar. I just like Tolkien's take on everything. But I think where he has a weak spot in borrowing so much from mythology is, as we've talked about, a lot of this ancient mythology has this weariness and sometimes helplessness about it. You mentioned with what was
Yes, and Eurydice.
well, no, the other one, not Oedipus Rex.
Oedipus of Colonus.
Oedipus of Colonus. Yeah, and a lot of the other mythology, just a lot of the ancient worldview on history is pretty circular. It doesn't resolve.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's no ultimate triumph.
There's no ultimate triumph.
Same struggle and triumph over
You
every.
see, like, you can think of like yin yang, even like when you see this in stars with the dark side and the light side, where you can never have a light triumph.
Ultimately, at least.
Yeah, and even literature, when light triumphs,
Without the darkness.
it just creates an imbalance. The darkness has to suck back, and so it's almost like
There's no
what's the-
infinite force of good.
yeah.
Point.
What's the point of even trying? It's kind of what you get from Star Wars, and
So you
different takes on that.
can have your day in the sun, presumably.
Yeah.
Charge for
The best take on that was Qui-Gon Jinn, who just said, "I don't care necessarily about the light winning, but I serve the light because it's the light," which is moving, but
it's as close as you could get in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a little depressing, but it's still inspiring just to see that dedication to truth and goodness and beauty. But when it comes to Tolkien, his works really lack that Christian hope in the earlier books, I feel like, because you see light, you see darkness, they're struggling, but you don't see the narrative of it. What's it's building toward? And you even see in the Lord of the Rings, Galadriel calls their war with Morgoth and Sauron the long defeat. She calls it, which is kind of sad. And it's been that way.
Especially since Morgoth ultimately died.
Yeah. It's not even. They defeated Morgoth, but she still calls it the long defeat. And I feel like that's a very pagan sort of worldview. And I don't think he's necessarily embracing that, because when you get to the Lord of the Rings, that's when you really start to see the forward narrative.
Yes. I feel like it took the addition of the Hobbit.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then obviously knowing Tolkien's worldview in real life, I don't think that's a position he would embrace. But I think in stealing some of that, he may have unconsciously borrowed a little bit of that weariness and senselessness. See, especially in Shoulder of Hurin, which is just a really depressing book. Honestly, pretty much based on Oedipus Rex. I feel like it's Oedipus Rex meets Romeo and Juliet.
Bart.
And you're not wrong.
Yeah.
So,
Oedipus Rex meets Romeo and Juliet meets Beowulf, honestly.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's a weird combo.
It is a weird combo.
Wumble story, but you're right. It's very depressing.
Yeah.
My parents gave that to me, I think, when I was in 8th grade. They were like, "Oh, this is Tolkien. You're going to like this book." They had no idea what I was about to get myself into. That was an experience.
How, man. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so application for that would be, just again, it's not that you need to stay away from myth. I think Tolkien borrowing from myth was brilliant and made his world so much richer than it could have been. But it's just, again, you got to understand the mythology and contextualize it. You have to always use it.
Okay, it almost helps, see if you guys agree with this. If you're going to be engaging with any mythology, to engage with a lot. To engage
Yeah,
read it very broadly.
which,
And
I mean, Tolkien did, but
yes. So what I'm saying is, like, if you want to read the Silmarillion, maybe consider also picking up some of the Nordic and Celtic mythology that informed his
sure.
worldview.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
so you can see what's similar, where he actually borrowed, where he, like,
Yeah.
the choices that he made in regards to his using the mythology become much more apparent.
Right. So if anybody here is really geeky like us and wants to do a study on mythology, like Tolkien is a good place because you can compare and contrast. I think there's things he did really right, he did wrong, and there's just a lot of lessons you can gain if you go in depth with it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's most of what I want to say. Since I already have the mic now, I'll just add one little teaser thing that I just want to share because it's cool. Is I think when you look at the modern landscape, obviously not very many people are openly worshiping deities. It's coming back more now than it was before.
It depends on what corner of Instagram
But I think what we
Or TikTok.
or TikTok.
I think what we find is that certain ones around in ancient culture are still around, but there's others that seem to have just kind of dropped off the face of the earth, like Zeus,
Fair.
like Zeus per se.
Diana,
Yeah, a lot of the Greek ones.
Persephone's sycophants, but that's
Yeah.
mostly from the modernization and rewriting of her myth
Yeah,
that people relate to.
I think a lot of the Greek and Roman ones, obviously the Egyptian and the Norse ones are still strong in our culture.
Norse more than Egyptian, I would say.
Yeah. But yeah, my take on that is if you read Psalm 82, Yahweh talks about judging these deities. It says you'll die like men. Now, men when they die, they don't cease to exist. So they just go down to Sheol, the grave. Like their spirits continue on in a holding place.
But they're no longer.
But they're no longer walking.
Yes, he says that.
Yeah, they're not walking around. They're not. Yeah. So my take on that is that that's why some of them are not active. I can't prove it.
A massive can of worms.
Yeah, I can't prove it necessarily. But if you're talking with somebody who's, I don't know, a worshiper of Odin, to say, "Free's not long for this world." Though.
That is a good take to have.
Yeah. Anyways.
Didn't you encounter an Odin at your job and you like straight up told him that was the stupidest thing you ever heard?
I'm not sure. He said something that was the stupidest. I don't think it was that. It was.
He had multiple contenders for the title.
As we were talking about it, it was just something he brought up that sounded like some weird theory he got off the dark corners of the internet. I don't think.
Appreciate your bluntness, Daeus. I know. That's why I appreciate it.
Anyways, yes, I'm not sure.
Like, I actually can't picture you saying those words. I'm sorry to detract. I just can't imagine those words in that order coming out of your mouth. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to see this.
Just the only time I've ever said that. And I'm not, if there's any people here who are Norse pagans, we're not trying to call you stupid, just to be clear.
Just that one guy.
Yeah, just that one guy.
If you're listening to our podcast.
Just that one guy. To the Norse pagans out there or any other pagans, so glad to have you on the show. Hope you're enjoying this. The thing is just that you're really missing out without Jesus because he's more awesome.
Yep.
So, I finished my popcorn. Who has popcorn that they want to?
I've got actual short popcorn.
Go for it.
The one final thing that just comes to my mind as we're talking about this topic is I think about what Paul says when he's on Mars Hill, standing like literally right under the Pantheon and under all the grandeur of the Greek Athenian religion, and he's talking about Christ. And one of the things he says is that you have been grasping after the God that you know exists to such extent that you put up these statues to the unknown God. And he goes on to say, I'm here to tell you who the real God is and to introduce them to Christ. But I think that idea of grasping after the God they knew is out there, but grasping darkly without able to really get their hands around him, to me, that informs the way that I read myths. That when we read myths, we need to remember that there is darkness here and there is sin and corruption, and we need to be wise and discerning about that. And yet there is a real grasping and searching for truth that we can find, which is why I find a lot to appreciate about the myths, because I think it points to the real common grace that can be found in them, even when there's other things you want to mark and avoid or just use as remembrance for why the real God is better than any of the pretenders.
Yeah, flip that. I can't top that, honestly.
No popcorn?
No popcorn.
Well, to wrap up this section, we have a little bit more to go. I just say we've been tackling a lot in this episode. Hopefully we did an okay job. If you're listening to this and like, I got a lot of questions, or or you want a little more application, you wish there's things we covered that we didn't, we'd be happy to know your thoughts. You can reply to this. You can reply through email at navigatingnarrativepodcast@gmail.com. If you see this or any clips of this on social media, YouTube, anywhere, you can reply in comments there. Though I may not see it if it's not on YouTube because I'm really bad about checking social media.
He doesn't check it.
So do it on YouTube. Yeah, so we'll try to interact with those and either respond like in person or maybe do a follow-up episode or like a follow-up little part of an episode. So we'd be happy to interact more with this because it's a big topic and we need feedback. So give us your feedback.
Yeah.
But this episode is not over because
that's Josiah, you have a book.
I do have a book that came out this week.
Your book that came out.
So yeah.
Yeah, so the name of the book is A Study of Shattered Spells. It's a magic school story told from the teacher's perspective, where a first-year teacher is given 8 months to train a prophesied hero. And when she discovers that the school is covering up bullying and a lot of bad things, she has to figure out how does she keep her job and her integrity at the same time while trying to train this prophesied hero and protect her students.
Yeah, nice. And I've actually got the opportunity to read this book, listen to the audiobook version, because I backed it on Kickstarter, and now it's finally coming out to the broad public. You can get it pretty much anywhere.
Anywhere books are sold online, yeah.
Anywhere online. So A Study of Shattered Spells, some things I really appreciated about it. One, you mentioned like bullying and stuff going on in the school. It really tackles a lot of those subjects really well. But as far as just like the story goes, really exciting story. And but it's got this hard to find mix where it feels very meaningful and very like suspenseful at the same time. Often you kind of get one or the other, but it's a book that each chapter just kept getting better and better for me. And by the end, when it resolved, it was now like a really cool ending that had been built up to really well.
Thank you.
So felt emotionally and thematically satisfying. Yeah. So I really recommend you guys go get this. Honestly, not just saying this because I know Josiah. One of the best books I've read this year.
Cool.
So, and
I haven't read any books this year. Space fiction.
You've had a review.
I have a review.
Yeah. So it's for people who like magic school stories. Obviously, I was saying last time we tried to record this that it reminded me a bit of The Order of the Phoenix, which was fun because that's my favorite Harry Potter book, and it's
my least favorite Harry Potter book. So
yeah, don't know what to make of that.
But I think it just means the book is for people across the reading spectrum. But I'll let people make their own determinations on that front.
It's because you have a bit of an underground resistance with it.
Yes.
It's still going on, and that was my favorite aspect of that book. You know, you've got this oppressive regime and this small, tight-knit community, and how do they handle that? So I appreciated that. What are some of the other vibes, or
like, what would you say is? I feel like the last time we talked about this, there was something in your book that had to do with mythology.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we were talking a little bit about is that, when you're looking at the religion in the story, there's, it's a made-up religion I made for the story. And one of the reasons why I felt inspired to do it is because of reading other mythologies and of seeing the ways in which when we see religions that aren't true, that can help us better appreciate the religion, that is true that we believe. And so there's aspects of that I wove into the religion of the story that, while there are some things that they talk about in the story, like the importance of grace and such, that are things that, we might agree with. There are other things like in the story, the characters don't believe they can pray to their God directly. They have to go through someone else in order to pray through their God. Yeah. And there are other things like that they wove into the story, both to create some defamiliarization to make it feel unique and authentic to the world, but also inspired by mythology of seeing the ways in which false things can help us better recognize and appreciate the truth for what a tree truly is.
Yeah, you really do unusual takes. mythology.
Review since I've known you, Josiah.
Yeah.
I do like different.
Yeah, for sure. Some of your earlier stories were like fantasy superhero stories.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those, you put your characters in like really unique moral dilemmas. So I feel like you like to go places that make readers feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes.
I do, because I think it's when we're feeling a bit uncomfortable that we start asking questions and thinking about the story.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, that's ultimately what makes a story good. I don't need to fully agree with it, but if it helps me better think about, well, what should I believe?
Yeah.
That's the ideal story in my book. So I try to weave some of that into the stories I write.
Yeah. I think there's values in different approaches, but yours is a unique approach that I haven't seen much. And I'm appreciating it more and more as I think about it. I think we talked last time about how a lot of Christian stories, especially their fantasy novels, just had this paper cutout religion that's like, insert Christianity. And right,
No, it's like insert evangelical.
that's right.
Yeah.
Insert watered, insert worshipful feeling. Insert vaguely happy feelings of
Insert
a God here. Yeah, and often, even though it may be meant to be theologically accurate, like they want to have something that could pass the Apostles' Creed or something, or at least not contradict it. Get in their fantasy world, that often the emotional impact that has on the reader is just like, yeah, you check the boxes. Where,
Not actually very.
yeah, it's not real. And if it's not real to the reader, then it misses one of the biggest aspects of Christianity. So it's real.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so check out Josiah's book, A Study of Shattered Spells, wherever books are sold online.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we'll have any last thoughts. Like I said, send us comments on email at navigatingnarrativepodcast@gmail.com.
If you have a favorite myth, tell us about it.
Yeah. Be happy to hear about that. Also, if you have someone you've just been wanting to talk about supernatural or weird stuff with somebody,
Fits the bill.
some really stuck up materialist person that you just want to see what they think if they explode when you give them this podcast episode, or you have like, I don't know, some next door neighbor lady who
Has a questionable number of cats and a shrine on the front porch. It's starting to be October, so those people are really showing themselves.
Yeah, this is your opportunity to be like, tell me what you think of this.
Yeah.
Or you don't have
Pretty
to.
social experiment.
Yeah.
Eye
Anyways.
protection recommended.
Eye protection.
Contents potentially explosive.
Like drama in your life, this could give you some drama. All right. Well, Josiah, thanks for coming on. It's awesome doing this in person on the floor. Very grounded episode.
Featuring my love.
Hey, this was a fantastic episode. Really love talking about all things mythology with you guys.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. Next episode, we will just about promise will be Hacksaw Ridge. We've been putting off for long enough, so your patience will be repaid. Thanks.